All right, what's up, people? Back with another podcast here on the Black Swan channel. This time we're going to be talking about long form versus short form type of manga creation. Black Swan has been doing a lot of short form, a lot of one shots throughout the years. So we're going to get his experience, what that's like, and why the heck he keeps doing it. Because some of us are like, nah, man, I've done enough. I'm going long ball. So, man, let's get right into it.
Initially, I think we all start with long form outlook. Like a long, not everybody, but me, I started with a long form perspective. Like I wanted to create this long series that incorporated all these elements, like incorporate like historical values in them. And I just wanted to like create like a long drawn out story. And that's what I started with. But I realized as I was working like long form, I would see like a lot of plot holes. Like I didn't plot out the story with enough foresight to see like, oh, there's a hole here, there's a hole here. And also I didn't really understand storytelling that well.
Would you say, because I remember Torishima speaking about the purpose of one shots in the context of bringing it to the audience under a well-known establishment such as Jump, you don't really have a choice in that situation. You have to go through some one-shot action to get the general reception of the audience. But I see people in the indie space outside the network and general market of an establishment have the same logic that I want to see what the general reception will be. And my question has always been you don't have access to the same market as Jump does. They are an establishment and they have a massive network, and people are always looking for something from them specifically. And then if you are just an indie guy who's not trying to go through an establishment but on your own and you just want to post it on a random manga site online, having this mindset of I want to see what the audience is going to think, it seems pointless to me because how are you going to measure if it is going to be in demand anyway? What is that real number that will determine that, aha, this amount of people said they like it, so I'm going to produce. See what I mean?
I don't know if it's a great idea, but what I was doing was I was basically taking my one shots and then actually turning them into books and selling the physicals at events, which I don't think is like the best idea because then people would ask you for follow-ups like, oh, is there a chapter two? Because it just seems like there's a closing of a story in this one particular book where people want to get, like you said, get invested with more long form content, which they can't do in these short one-shot mangas or books.
Exactly. Okay, though it was an interesting idea for you to make it like that, that you will sell it. Try to get some form of investment. And that, in a way, is a measurement of, I suppose, of the reception. Like if you sold over 10, well, I mean, to be unknown and selling over 10 books of a one shot, that ought to motivate you. But I still don't think it's a good idea in the long form. Okay, so you mentioned um, you would see plot holes in the long form version. You were speaking for yourself, right? So, how many chapters have you done before in the long form version where you started seeing the cracks that, oh, damn, I've already invested so much time in this and I'm seeing cracks up in here? How many chapters deep were you in?
So back in the day when I first started, I would start off doing the storyboards in Photoshop, and then I would send it to the artists and then kind of work with them in crafting the story. And there's been times where a lot of times where I've gotten to like the third chapter and then I've kind of wanted to input other things, or I've inputted things as we were going through the process, and those things totally threw the story off from like the first chapter to the third chapter. I've written like almost a whole book, but just changing one little piece, sometimes you'll have to go back and change like a lot of stuff in the stories. So it's like, you got to really make sure that you've got all these little holes, all these little things. Like even if you like have a character's personality, sometimes you might have to change a lot in another chapter just because of the way they react to certain situations. I can't recall exactly what some of the incidents were. I tried to think about it last night, but every time I've tried to write a long form story and not a one shot, there's always like some plot holes in there. That's where the editors come in. Like editors can spot those plot holes before you can kind of like put the stuff down on paper.
Indeed, that is the point of an editor, but we all know now that they are completely jacked in the head. You saw the new Shonen Jump editor in chief. He's completely like a major hunchback, man. There's no hope for Jump. But how I usually have done it, right, is that I remember a long time ago, I would do storyboards for a whole volume first. And I did this twice, and then I realized that there would be plot holes, right? Because you're thinking ultra linearly. If you're trying to create one whole book, let's say the whole book is 8 or 6 chapters, you are in a ultra linear state of mind. So when I realized when I was about to draw, like I got like 6 chapters storyboarded, and I'm drawing the third one. I was like, I need to add something here. You know, I didn't build enough foreshadowing, or suddenly this character feels different to what he was or what he's going to be because I didn't add something there. That's the problem when you're in storyboard mode for multiple chapters. But if you create one storyboard for one chapter and give yourself time to recover, to heal, recalibrate. By the next time you start drawing the new storyboard, you'll start afresh where you're not in an ultra linear state of mind. You can view this next chapter holistically, and you can see while in the storyboard phase that this is what I can add, this is what I can whatever, and it just works better, right? At least that worked for me.
What do you think are the benefits of long form storytelling?
Definitely building a relationship with the audience. People would love and need long form, bro. Like, look at short form YouTube in general. Nobody remembers what the hell was going on, bro. They don't remember anything, right? Just using that as an example. But if you got long form action, it has more impact, right? It has way more impact because if Coffee Comics was out there just doing 30-second screams like Hunchback, 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 and then I disappear, maybe people would just remember Hunchback as if they remember 6'7" all the time, right? But what the hell is 6'7"? And then others be like, what the hell is Hunchback? You see what I mean? But if you
Mm.
got the long form, you establish the context of things. You establish the relationship with the characters, with customer and provider, right? Service provider, and there's more
Mm.
trust, you know. So I based on what Torishima said, short form is important in the context of being in an establishment. But if you're just some guy who's outside of the establishment, I would say you create short form just to sharpen your skills. I would say artistically or narratively, in which you have a particular idea that you want to be shared in that one chapter. So you practice actually the hero's journey or the 4 point method, right? The Kishino Ketsu method on how to deliver that message in the short form version of the story, just as practice. But at the end of the day, people want a long series, not 400 chapters, but maybe like 12, 16 volumes, you know?
I agree with you from the perspective of the benefits of long form. What would you say the cons of long form storytelling are, you think?
Definitely, people can fall out of love with the story, like One Piece. Gonna have a roasting session on One Piece soon. Saw some Japanese people on Twitter saying One Piece is hunchback food right now. Editors don't know what they're doing. Things I've been saying, looking at One Piece pages, I'm like, what the hell is Oda doing? I can't see anything over there. Where are the editors? Yada yada yada. So that is the first major con disadvantage of a long form is that if it does go for too long, people get fatigued. Or let's say it hasn't gone for too long. Maybe it's like 80 chapters in, 100 chapters in, but it feels like things are just happening. There isn't a point. There is no real growth, such as Kagurabashi, right? Such as My Soccer Academia at the time. uh, People compensate for a lack of a message with multiple characters and multiple random events happening, whether it's action or booty. And that is the primary disadvantage of long form. Some people, like the new editors, could say, well, we don't know what's going to make people stick. That's bullcrap. You do know. Torishima knows. He wrote a book on it. So it's unacceptable to live in the fear that I'll stick to the short form because I don't know if people will stick with me in the long run with the long form. That just means you didn't read what Torishima said, nor have you studied your so-called favorite books. Oh, Naruto is my favorite. Okay, you stuck with it from start to finish. What made you stick? Was there a time where you felt fatigued? A lot of people felt fatigued during the Fourth Ninja War. There were a lot of repetitive fights that really wouldn't add to the grand end of the story, or it didn't have much of an effect on the main plot or whatever. It was just there. And that at the time definitely was because of the editors milking everything to death, that just stretch this thing out. When the people get tired, we'll cut it back. But for now, stretch it out. So, yeah.
I guess the con that I see with long form is that it's like basically a huge time investment. So you have to actually know what you want to say, and you have to actually be like 100% sure this is what I want to follow through with. This is the story that I want to tell. And once you commit, it's like you're committing time, you're committing money, you're committing whatever else to this long form thing. So it's like you have to be 100% sure about this story. And I think that you risk like burnout and all that other stuff because it's like you keep contributing to a story that might not you might have not necessarily thought all the way through, which I think would be like a kind of a problem with long form sometimes.
I remember experiencing that problem as a teenager. Funny enough, people now in their 30s who still have that problem. It's like, dude, we were supposed to get through this phase as teenagers. If people didn't put in the work in their teenage years, trying their long form series back then, there's no way they can make it right now. Look at White Wonga for an example. This is somebody who started when I was a teenager, 15 years ago, for goodness sake, bro. I was still in high school and this guy started Apple Sack, and it was to be a long form series. I remember him saying he wanted it to be around 300 chapters. And so he began to draw it with the intention of making it long form. And then the first book came out. All of us were actually disappointed, right? We didn't know. The thing is, back then, we could not articulate our problems with it, and we were too fearful. We were too starstruck by White Manga at the time that he can do no wrong. And who am I to say anything because he managed to do something and finish something, or get started on something, get forward with it, and I haven't. But he's definitely an example of you started with the long form and you committed to it, and you don't know what the hell you have to say with it. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know where it's going, right? It's just a combination of a bunch of shonen tropes and new DI garbage up in there. That is just a concoction of disaster, you know? So he should have started all over again a long time ago, or he should have practiced more with short form series in getting a type of point across. He didn't do that. And that's why he's where he is now.
The reason that I prefer short form, because to me, what I've experienced going from like a long term outlook to a short form perspective or one shot perspective is it allows me to consolidate my idea, which is if I have a theme or if I have whatever and it's a good theme, it's a great topic, it could be kind of catchy, it will allow me to like conceptualize this. Like it's like, okay, if I need to make this long form, I can, but can I make this interesting? Like they have something called a log line in writing, where it's like, okay, if I state this one little line, this is like the summation of what this entire project is about. And I think a one shot is kind of like similar to that. Like, can I surmise this entire project in this one shot? And if I can surmise this thing into one shot, it could potentially be more of maybe a long form series if it's that interesting. And also, if you are submitting to companies, whether they Japanese or American or whatever, French or whatever, you may submit things like they have contests, right? So it's like if you submit things to a contest, you may not want to submit your long form ideas because a lot of times they're taking the rights to your work. So it's like, okay, so if I submit this little thing, I'll make it interesting. I'll add some flair to it. I'll add some pop, but I don't want to actually give any meaningful attributes to this story because then I lose all my rights. So I think that that's one reason why people in the one shot category, why people may sometimes not submit their actual long form concepts into short form stories.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Your story, Bloody Hell, is viewed as a long form, like it started as a long form and it's going to end as a long form story, right?
I wouldn't say it started as a long form because here's the thing. It was only somebody made it obvious to me. He said, "Yo, man, I've been following you for years, and your character Jacob right now kind of reminds me of your first long form manga that you made a long time ago called The Red Thunder Prince, and his name was Kazuya, right?" And then I remember that. Oh snap! I remember Kazuya, and I had 5 or 6 chapters done of the Red Thunder Prince. I even printed out those books a long time ago while I was still in high school, man. And I remember there was only one guy who bought it. And I had like printed 50 of them, but then it was from this jacked up printing shop. Ultimately, I remembered that, wait, the design does look like Tasia. The story, however, not the same completely, but there was an element of revenge, right? There's an element of revenge and trying to make the most out of the new situation you find yourself in. So, just on that alone, Bloody Hell did not completely start as a long form. It started as a short term from almost a decade ago, right? And then it was only later in 2021 that it came back as Bloody Hell, from Tasia to Jacob, from
Mm, mm.
humans with some elemental powers to vampires.
I guess my question would be, given that it's your long form work now, looking back, would you change anything at the beginning that would affect anything in the further chapters? Like, is there anything that you saw that you're like, oh man, I can't change that now because I'd have to go back and change a lot of stuff?
The only thing that I would like to change or would change is just a few panels artistically. That's it.
Mm.
In terms of story, adding things, I've already added them in the remaster. So in the remaster
Uh,
of Volume 1, that was the whole point, that I'm not actually taking anything away. I'm just adding, right? I added more context because prior to the remaster, I was just doing it. I didn't care. I was like, this is just to express myself. And then when I took it seriously, I'm like, nah, let me go add some things.
One of my bigger ones, Mr. Sasaki, it was like I thought of all these little details, like going back, like once I did the one shot. And I look back on, I'm like, oh shit, I could add this at the beginning. Like this would be like an interesting element to like make this thing more interesting at the opening chapters. Like, because the opening chapters are like the ones that stick to you, right? It's like, okay, damn, okay, I'm in now because so it's like where you want to display all these interesting things. And I didn't even think about this stuff until like later down the road once I finished the one shot, which I felt like the one shot gave me time to like consolidate, like look at it from outside what's already there and then kind of like focus on adding these elements to kind of develop it, like who he lives with, what type of person he lives with. Does he live by himself? Does he live outside? Does he what type of people does he stumble upon? And then you just kind of come about these random ideas after you finish like a one shot. So it gives you time to like conceptualize everything that's like just taking place. So for me, it's like I prefer the one shot strategy, even though we don't have that industry to be able to take our one shots places and kind of get them published. But I prefer it because it gives me like the ability to build on what already exists, which I could do that in just writing. But to me, it's like once you see it visually, it gives you like more ideas to like add to it.
Yeah, I hear you. There's a guy I once interviewed called Cruiser. He's a horror artist, got screwed over by Ethan Van Sciver, but he focuses on the theme of horror, psychological horror, right? And on his webtoons, it's unfortunate. The guy's truly amazing, and the stories are incredible, man. I'm like, this guy should be at the top of the mountain, but he's not. Like no one even knows him right now. They did, and then Ethan sent his goons. But anyway, focusing on just the horror theme in general, psychological horror, he creates short stories under a universe in a way. It's like this is the whatever universe. And in this universe, though the people are not really connected, there's different characters. The events that happen in this universe and the people that are in it, they all uniquely experience different types of horror, right? And it's all under the Kuza universe or whatever he calls it, right? And they are short stories, so one chapter could be like 40 pages of. I'll use one example of this one football player who one day starts losing his mind and he sees aliens walking around and he thinks the aliens are going to eat people, and then he's checked into an asylum and the doctor is trying to help him out, and he just flips out completely. There's this conspiracy as well in the universe that all these people are experiencing different types of horror because of one grand alien orbiting the earth, playing with their minds. It's interesting, bro. So they're all short stories related to one theme in a way. And I was like, I'll definitely buy a big volume of these compiled short stories. So maybe you could try doing that as well someday.
What is your verdict if you were gonna choose long form or short form, or what would be your recommendation for the audience or whoever? What would you say?
It depends what you're trying to say as an individual, right? For me, I definitely am the type who needs to have a long form because the type of message I'm trying to deliver, it can only have impact with just one character who's going to deliver the final message. You have to see his journey, the ups and downs and whatnot, like Berserk. You have to see everything through the eyes of Guts and a few other characters. I think for other people who are not like me, where you just want to explore multiple ideas, but keep it contained, like how Kuzer does it, right? Kuzer explores ideas and responses to horror and trauma with different characters from different parts of America. I didn't see where the characters are outside of America. He explores those reactions, those themes. How would a football player react to this? How would a businesswoman react to this? And so on. Um, then it's better to do it short form. But if you contain it within the same universe, it's just easier for the consumer not to get lost. That's like, so you made a one shot of this idea and that's it. It's not connected to something bigger. Most people will be turned off by that. They'll be turned off by that. But if you tell them, no, it's connected to something bigger, not that there's a promise that you will connect every event, but just knowing that they are all connected, it helps the audience commit. They'll commit to it.
So you would say like long form basically helps get the reader invested, whereas short form is more like just like a general layout for to get the idea out or something.
Short form is to explore multiple ideas and get to the point of those ideas.
All right. Well, it sounds like good. I guess we can wrap it up for today, huh?
Yeah, all right, y'all. Join us again next time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And don't be a hunchback. See you next time.